and I couldn't believe that like Ant-Man, like they actually put that into the movie where like he did that to Thanos. Like I just couldn't believe that. And then like Spider-Man dying in the end, I can't believe that. So, oh shit, we're live. Oh, excuse me. Hopefully I didn't spoil anything for Avengers Endgame there. So that was a joke. I was just intentionally pulling a prank on any folks out there that might have not seen Avengers Endgames because I myself haven't seen it yet. All jokes aside, hello everyone. Thanks for tuning in for another weekly live stream. I'm really glad to have you here today. For the folks that are regular viewers, welcome back to the show. And for anyone that's new out there, my name is the Gossip Guy, and as I like to say, I'm your source for news and developments from the world powered by Hashgraph. And what we like to do on a weekly basis is just to cover some of the latest developments going on, as I said before, in the world powered by Hashgraph and the Hedera ecosystem. And for this episode, I'm also honored to be joined by my trusted co-host, SupremeMax67. So if you want to say hello there, SupremeMax.
Hi, everybody. And myself, I haven't seen the movie, so I'll be blocking everyone with my Bluetooth headphones while taking the bus, listening to music for like a full week straight, and ignoring any conversation that's currently happening. I'm not active on Facebook or Twitter, so that's at least I won't be exposed to anything that's happening there.
That's right. Hey, it's probably a good thing that you're not on Twitter because this past week was quite a lot of fun stuff happened there, and I'll get to it towards the end of the episode. But before I shift over here, SupremeX67, I also understand last week's episode you weren't able to join us because there happened to be, well, I guess last weekend was a special weekend for you, if I kind of understand correctly, right?
Yes, something to do with the day I was born.
So in case anyone was wondering, the reason SupremeX67 wasn't able to join us was he was celebrating his 20th birthday.
Sure, we can go with that.
Just some jokes there. All right, so all jokes aside, let's just dive into the agenda here. So, have to admit, this has been a relatively quiet week in the world powered by Hashgraph, and just a quiet week overall from the community. So, I thought I would take some time to take a look at a pretty interesting project that I've come across, and all thanks to Arvidras Dublisky for pointing it out to me. That I thought that it would be worthwhile to maybe take some time to look at. Specifically, it's this Prov project being produced by Xtremepush and being built on top of looks to be leveraging like Hashgraph technology. So we'll kick things off by taking a look at that. Then after that, I figured we'd just take some time looking at some updates coming from Hashgraph. More so, taking a look at some content coming from the community. Specifically, there was a really good post out there from a community member just giving a tutorial around how can you launch your first smart contract on top of the testnet. And then also wanted to highlight a pretty interesting post that I came across on hashgraph.org, or the community channel for all things Hashgraph. And lastly, the third segment I wanted to cover, and this is not so much Hashgraph focused, but more about DLT industry overall. There was a pretty exciting development this past week that involved SocGen, who we have who we have listed over there on the screen there. So we'll cover that in a little bit more detail, but figured we just go over some of the developments coming from the world powered by Hashgraph. All right, so before we also get started, if you haven't done so already, make sure to smash that like button and also consider subscribing if you want to stay posted on further news and developments, because we do these streams once a week, and as a lot of us are still waiting on open access and also community testing, phase 2. This will be a great medium to cover some of these continued developments. So like I said, consider subscribing. And before we also get into the content of today's episode, just as a reminder, and as I've been saying over and over again in a lot of my content, basically, myself, the Gossip Guy, I don't work for Hedera Hashgraph, nor do I receive any compensation or opportunities to invest as a result of doing this content. All topics that are discussed today represent my personal views and opinions, or also SupremeMax 67's personal views and opinions, and not that of Hedera Hashgraph, the entity. At the end of the day, both myself and SupremeMax 67 were just active community members, just wanting to put together some content to talk about all the different developments going on, and just lending our own personal views to it. So I guess with that said, or I don't know, SupremeMax 67, if there's anything you want to add here before we dive into the content.
Not really. I haven't looked up what the topic is going to be today, so I'm curious as the audience right now. So
okay, well, I guess I like to implement a little element of surprise there. All right, so to kick things off, what I wanted to do was to introduce everyone to this pretty interesting project that that was introduced to me. Like I mentioned before, Arvidras Dublisky, a pretty active member in the community, had shared this with me a couple weeks back. At the time I was traveling, and then I totally forgot about it, and we were talking yesterday, and I thought this would be something that would be pretty cool to kind of just point out, because essentially this is a project that really kind of showcase some of the unique features of Hashgraph that enable app developers to build applications in such a way to leverage a lot of the performance and throughput benefits that they receive from Hashgraph that they might not be able to achieve on other distributed ledger platforms. And what we have here is Prov, which is a project being developed by a company called Xtremepush, who is, as I understand, is more kind of like an ad tech firm that's based in the UK, or I guess based in Ireland. And if you recall, during the original announcement of the Hedera Hashgraph platform, Xtremepush was one of the projects that was kind of featured there, as far as them basically leveraging some of the elements of DLT into their products that are geared towards basically people running like marketing campaigns online. And what's interesting about Prov is that, as we understand, being built on top of, says here on the site, Hashgraph. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily the public or private instance of Hashgraph, but I would imagine there's a lot of benefits of being able to run this on the public instance of Hadera. So we'll just run with that assumption, but I can be completely wrong here, just going off of what's listed here on the site. And essentially, AdProv is a platform that allows digital advertisers to efficiently monitor their online ads for fraud and automatically optimize their delivery. So basically, we just run through the site here, and obviously, if you want to follow along yourself, I've left links to this content down below, and also for all the other content that we're going to discuss in today's episode, I've also left it down below. So let's start things off with the problem. So ad fraud and inaccurate delivery against media plans are rampant in today's programmatic ecosystem. Most participants are incentivized to perpetrate it and not to prevent it. Out of $1 spent on media, a vast majority goes to waste, which means that you're only getting 2% of the value from the dollar that you spend. So, said another way, if you're an advertiser, when you go to run your ad campaigns, every dollar that you're going to spend only is going to equate to actually 2 cents of true value that you achieve. And really that means is the actual impression, if you're running like a piece of content online, at the end of the day, you're only going to be able to receive like 2 cents in the value there. And a lot of that comes from, as we kind of have like listed out here, the total costs that it takes to like actually work with media agencies and people to actually place your advertisement, and then also just like pure loss that's taken from just more or less people either fraudulently viewing your content, like running ads but not actually um, engaging with it, or like other kind of ways that just people are not actually uh, getting the most out of their ad campaigns. So to kind of support that, we introduce AdProv, which is the only scalable and zero latency solution that allows you to prevent any fraud from being delivered in your campaigns. In addition, by using Hashgraph distributed ledger technology, AdProv identifies and prevents discrepancies between media plans and delivery attributes. And basically, I guess AdProv leverages kind of like three components here. So there's the AdProv, which is the identifies and eliminates frauds and useless middleman via Hashgraph tokenization. Then I guess there's another component of it called ID Prov, which provides immutable, deterministic cross device identifiers across the ecosystem to identify consumers in an immutable but non PPI way. And then Data Prov assesses the accuracy of your data, provides to data providers to identity and remove targeting mismatches. So I guess what it sounds like is essentially they're identifying who are true actual like users or actual content consumers, and making sure that the content is being appropriately directed to them in a way that basically ensures that hey, if you're running an ad campaign, it's actually reaching the people that want to be seen. And also I would imagine, given that the characteristics of the distributed ledger platform, that there's some degree of eliminating like the middlemen that are responsible for like actually like placing the advertisements. So moving on here, this is just basically kind of a further overview of kind of some of the pain points and the existing ecosystem within the ad tech space, which is highly fragmented, opaque, and full of fraud and planning delivery discrepancies. And basically, AdProv is providing a platform that only allows whitelisted, authenticated, and fraud-free media data users by identifying the source and the type of fraud and preventing it from delivery. So I guess basically at the end of the day, you're looking at the potential audiences and making sure that hey, this is not a potential fraudulent audience of bots or whatnot that are that the ad's being targeted to. And I guess this provides a lot of benefits to to the actual advertiser, in the sense that hey, you get a sense that your ads are going to be directed at the right people. And then also I guess in this kind of like graphic here, it ultimately helps with the supply side and also the demand side, for people looking to advertise online. And ultimately, the more efficiencies that are brought to the ad tech space, the better it is for both consumers and those looking to advertise online. And as we pointed out before, AdProv, the project itself is basically backed by some of the folks that are involved with Xtremepush, some of the senior team members there. So thought this was a pretty interesting kind of development that I thought that we'd want to kind of like point out here. Very interesting use case using a DLT and using kind of the distributed elements of it. I'm curious to see how maybe micropayments take place, or how micropayments are leveraged in this. and to what extent there's an actual smart contract that's running on top of this. But it looks like, one of the reasons why they're looking to use Hedera in this case is probably the higher throughput of transactions. So, like I said, I think this is something you should definitely go and check out, because it's just a very interesting use case from what we've seen as far as some of the other folks kind of like developing the ecosystem, as far as like the use case that they have on top of Hedera. So SupremeX 67. I know this was kind of your first time checking this out, but do you have any kind of thoughts or comments as it relates to this?
Thoughts and comments. Not so much. I think they have a pretty nice representation of what's affecting revenue when people are buying advertisement. I mean, just think of the potential if someone bought advertisement, and would that be a factor of 49 or 40? I guess they would take maybe a 10% cut. But yeah, imagine that for the same price you're paying your advertisement for, let's say for $100, you're getting 40 times more exposure for it. Kind of a big deal for everybody. Um, Consumers, from their perspective, they're probably going to be like, this is spamming me with advertisement more than usual. You know what? I think for consumer, this is even a better thing, because what Google does right now. I'm talking about Google because we're on YouTube. But what Google does right now is literally pushing advertisement whether you're looking at it or not, and that just means you're getting swarmed with more advertisement in the hope that one of them reaches you out. I think we'll get more efficiency placement, and once you've seen the advertisement or you've in some ways acknowledged the advertisement, then that advertisement never shows up again. I guess we'll probably get less spam and advertisers get more for their money.
Totally. Well, and then I guess you also have some experience with kind of the YouTube advertisements, and I guess now at this point, like I also have some kind of experience with that too. It's it's kind of really crazy to just see like how much people put into the advertisements, but then to actually see like what they get out of it. Like not to trash anything, but I know just my personal experience before I was doing Gossip Guy stuff. I've had some experience doing videos on Facebook, and I always remember like they always suggest you to promote your videos, and I just experimented around with like running like ad campaigns, and I remember that like you got like a very limited amount of impressions, but the impressions that you actually got, so like the impressions are like how many times the video or whatnot appeared in people's feeds. But it was like ridiculous because the impressions that you got were just like so low quality. Like it was basically the only people that were watching it were bots, and not bots that I was paying for, but just purely bots that other people had running on the Facebook platform, because I guess you want to run bots and have it watch random content because you want it to look like a human being. So as a result, they target certain content to follow, so it makes it look like, hey, I'm a natural person following this random dude posting videos, so that the Facebook algorithms don't catch you. But as a result, is use like the content, producer, or I guess in this case like an advertiser goes, you could really like it really sucks because your stuff's not actually being viewed by someone that's actually going to convert, or someone that's actually going to the content or advertisements actually going to have a meaning to. So I can definitely see why it's important to really make sure that you have identity of the people that are actually following the content, and then also making sure that it's being targeted in the right manner. So yeah, so I thought it was pretty cool to just highlight that. So I guess just to kind of like move along here. So I guess the next piece here, just wanted to kind of cover some other interesting developments, kind of in the going on in the Hashgraph community, and I guess the first thing to maybe just like call out here was a kind of interesting article that I saw from a community member, Ilya apologies here. Solovanov. Am I pronouncing that right? Supreme Max 67.
Ilya Solovyanov. Solovyanov. I think that's right.
Or what we can do here is
medium.com/xclbrio/.
I was just trying to do the computer read of it to just make sure we had the correct pronunciation, but we'll just move on. But anyway, Ilya here wrote a pretty interesting piece here that I thought that it's just worthwhile to highlight in case anyone's interested. And once again, if you want to follow along, I've left links to this down below. But clearly, if this is also something you want to revisit afterwards, like I said, you can go and check this out. But the title of this Medium post is How to Deploy Smart Contracts on the Hedera Hashgraph Network. And basically, this is an article completely dedicated to how do you deploy like Solidity smart contracts on top of the Hedera testnet, which is currently available right now for developers to build on top of. And essentially, I'll skip over the first parts of this because more or less this is kind of geared towards someone that might not be as familiar with Hedera. So they have some just basic backgrounds there. But where things, kind of start off, like probably the most relevant here is kind of getting started. I think that anyone that's out there that's a developer that's already been playing around on the testnet, this is, this is something you're probably already familiar with, but in case anyone's out there that is not a developer that's just curious on how do you actually, go from, basically get started and being able to like launch a smart contract on the testnet. I guess the first step you go through is, KYC process. So for all those that participated in the community testing program, this is basically where you go in, you set up a portal account, and basically just prove you are who you say you are. Just giving some basic credential information about yourself. And then from there, when you go in, this is what kind of like varies with the community testing program, but more so for the like if you're going to develop and use the test nets. When you go in and you register, basically you go in and select the specific test net that you're going to be like using, and from there, after you select that, then basically you go to acquire, like, or more or less join, select join a network, and then you're given email verification code to just, basically re-verify like yourself, and then you enter that again on the portal to basically link up your portal account to the respective account on the testnet. And then this is where you go onto GitHub to actually generate the public and private keys. Well, basically you get the specific Java files to then run a to get your public key and private keys like on the testnet. And, we'll just kind of skip over this, but like I said, you can go check this out in further details. But more or less, once you generate your private key and public key, then you can then go and set up the respective SDKs that you want to develop in. So really the most official support, like, so as everyone's aware, they have SDKs in Java, Rust, C, Go, Python, etc. But from what we've heard from many folks in the community is really Java's the only one that's robustly supported, where the other ones, like, there's a lot of like kind of bugs that are associated with them. So Java is the way to possibly go if you're looking to launch your smart contracts or to develop on the testnet for Hedera. And this article basically proceeds to follow the Java SDK with similar reasons to what I just listed before. And then basically you go into some of the files within the SDK to then basically go in and run the associated like executable files, and then Basically, we have here just some of the initial code that you can put in, from Solidity to then be able to run kind of your first, smart contract. So, like I said, I'm not personally like a developer, so I'm not gonna pretend to, be an expert on this for the rest of the article. But like I said, I thought this was relatively straightforward article that kind of guides you through how to get, be able to launch your first smart contracts on top of the testnet for Hedera. I know other folks in the community that are developers have noted that this was a pretty helpful piece of information for folks that are looking to kind of get started with the Hedera SDKs. So I definitely recommend that you go and check that out. So while we're talking about developers, I thought this would also just be a little bit of an interesting segue before we move on to the next topic to also talk about some of the open positions that Hedera has. Because while we're still waiting for community testing phase 2 and open access, same time too, it looks like Hedera is actively going out there on the recruiting front to hire a lot of technical jobs out there. And just to kind of validate that, I pulled up some of the information from their job board there, just listing out some of the roles that they're currently hiring for, and it ranges from just basically general like engineer manager to full stack software engineers, middleware or platform as a service engineers, software developers, specifically those that have experience with GPU processors, mobile developers, SDK applications, and backend developers. So kind of going across the full gambit of technical expertise that's needed to run a distributed ledger platform like Hadera. So I think it's really good to see that they're putting their resources into hiring some of the technical resources there, because I know that there was a big push. Hedera was hiring a lot of folks on kind of like the sales, community, and also developer advocate front. But at the same time, too, it's really important that they, hire a lot of folks that, have the technical expertise that can help, continue to support the platform and especially make that final push to get things ready for, final open access there. So, Supreme 67, I don't know if you had any kind of like thoughts on that as far as kind of the where Hedera's at on the recruiting front.
Yeah, I don't know if I have thoughts. I'm trying to see if I can share those.
Yeah.
I think the one that is the most important one, in my opinion, is the GPU specialist. So the software developer, GPU specialist. I don't know if any of our audience really keeps track of what's happening in the scene, but NVIDIA recently announced, well, not too recently, support for ray tracing. How can they use the algorithm for taking full benefits of that? I mean, when they did their testing, they didn't use a GPU or multiple GPUs. They didn't use a GPUs that wasn't available on the market. They used a GPU that was already there. They even mentioned it in March 2018, which GPU that was. And the GPUs have gotten so much more powerful since then. And their concern of bottleneck was easily subsided. I mean, what was it, 1 million verification
Signature verifications.
Exactly, which is more than what the internet can spit out because of the latency. The technology is going fast enough in that area that I'm not concerned. I think if there is a bottleneck at the graphic level, we're not going to see that for at least 5 to 10 years as the circuitry on on graphic boards gets harder and harder to manufacture, because as you get closer to one, okay, I'm going a bit sideways scientific here.
No, please. We always appreciate
as you get closer to 1 nanometer in terms of size, you have something called a quantum tunneling effect, where the circuitry doesn't is not cut off by an electronic switch, and it ceases to behave logically. And when you have a processor that ceases to behave logically, it can't be manufactured. There's people working on workarounds for that. Not Hedera Hashgraph. I mean, people like NVIDIA, Hashgraph, Intel, all the manufacturer for processors are working to find a solution to get to that 1 nanometers. But the closest one they got so far, I think, is 7 nanometers. Um, when we get to that point, then eventually internet will catch up, but we're 5, maybe 10 years away from GPU ever bottlenecking for that. And
Yep.
at that point, we're looking at processing transactions far superior than, in my guess, 2 to 5 million transactions a second on a single shard. That's when I can potentially see a bottleneck maybe happening, but that's a high volume on a single shard. 2 to 5 is like, I don't think we're gonna be complaining that there is a bottleneck at that speed.
Totally. Well, there you have it, folks. SupremeX67, our GPU specialist. So, hey, SupremeX67, you know that there's an open position there for GPU specialist. I'm just throwing it out there in case you want to jump over to the Hedera team there.
No. My skill set is I understand the concept, but I don't have the skill to program a GPU. No way.
It's all good. Yeah. So I guess anyway here, just thought it's always good to take a look at the open positions that Hedera has, see how well that they're being filled. Just seeing where the distribution is. Like I said, it's really good to see that it's being geared more to the technical side. And I guess also, if anyone's watching it out there and is interested to go work for Hedera Hashgraph, feel free to check out some of these postings, because hey, looks like Hedera needs some help building the future there. So moving on here, I thought I would kind of shift things over to hashgraph.org. And just as before we kind of just dive in here, just as a refresher, in case anyone that's new that's watching this, hashgraph.org is the kind of community dedicated channel or website for all things Hashgraph. So this is like intended to be a little bit separate from Hadera, which is the company focused on developing the Hedera Hashgraph platform. Hashgraph.org is more geared towards just basically education. This is the kind of the portal for all things ambassadors, and then also where a lot of other kind of content is that's geared in other like languages. So what kind of caught my attention here today or this past week was this article called Market Assessment by PwC, and everyone should read this. Well, more or less, this is basically it looks like this user here, Miriam Laipi, came across this article from PwC that kind of talked about public networks or public distributed ledger networks, and kind of started to do some comparison tests amongst them. Now, I apologize, this is really difficult to see on screen. And the other thing too is I'm hesitant from actually showing the actual PDF itself on this live stream, because it looks like there was some kind of some content considerations there specific to just who is supposed to gain access to it. But like I said, if you want further information on it, you can go and download a copy of this PDF file where you can see the the images more clear. But more or less, this market assessment broke things down based on performance, governance, and fairness, and then also talked about some of the elements of distributed consensus. And I apologize, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see on screen, but what we see here on this first, I guess, slide here for performance is the way things are kind of listed out here is on the left side is.
Hey, guys.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Do you want to put the PDF link in the chat room?
Well, like I said, I put the I'll put that into the chat. They can go to the hashgraph.org, and then you can actually download the PDF document that's there. Like if I click on it, it causes a little bit like issues there. So I'm just gonna kind of go off of the page, the hashgraph.org page. But like I said, just sent everyone a copy of the link, so if you want to go and check it out yourselves, uh, I sent that over. But like I said before, on the left hand side, basically states, poor performance. Right hand side, excellent performance. And definitely there's a high degree of subjectivity that's associated with this, but it's coming from an independent source, somewhat of a trusted source within the enterprise, software space. Coming from one of the big four consulting firms. And what you'll see here is that for performance wise, you'll see that both Nano and Hedera scored some of the top marks, and that kind of makes a lot of sense given that both Nano and Hadera are based on directed acyclic graphs. Directed acyclic graphs can ultimately achieve a little bit kind of quicker throughput of transactions because they're not bound to the same data structure as like a blockchain, so they tend to be a little bit more faster in being able to process transactions. When we dive into governance, this is where you'll see like Hedera actually is like showing relatively high marks. Like I said, you can't really read it here on the screen, but you can check that out in the PDF document. This, once again, I'm sure is very subjective on it because I'm curious if they're looking at governance as whether or not it's considered decentralized or not. But just like I said before, an independent view basically gave Hedera relatively like high marks there. When it comes to fairness, this was one where Hedera once again got a higher marks there. And I think this is really comes down to just the ordering of the transactions, as we're probably all aware. Hedera is deterministic as opposed to being probabilistic, as a lot of the other like blockchains, other distributed ledger platforms are designed to handle transactions. So thus, this is one. It doesn't surprise me that Hedera has some of the highest marks when it comes to fairness. Like I think the other ones, those could be a little bit more subjective, but I think this is one that it clearly makes sense that Hedera, was able to lead the way on this. And then lastly, second to last here is distributed consensus. And then this is really, when it comes down to it, with Hedera's asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance characteristics of the algorithm, or the Hashgraph algorithm, this is really helps it to stand out from the rest of the crowd as far as really achieving the highest marks when it comes to distributed consensus. And then lastly here, you have security, and you see Hedera kind of matching up relatively, in line with a lot of the other like platforms here. So, like I said, the PDF document, I'm having a hard time being able to share it on the live stream. But if you want to go and check it out yourselves, feel free to go check out the article on hashgraph.org. And yeah, I mean, I think this is, like I said before, this is relatively a subjective kind of like view. But like I said, it's coming from, a big four consulting firm that, gave some kind of, market assessment of sorts of public distributed ledger platforms. I'm not really sure the date of when this assessment was made. Same time too, as we're all aware, we're still waiting for open access. So anything that's called out here with Hedera in comparison to the other platforms, Hedera still hasn't been officially, the mainnet is live and launched, but yet it's still not truly running out there in the wild. So curious to see if these marks still stand up, once open access takes place and kind of things get into motion. But still, I think it's worthwhile to note that Hedera, in compared to some of these other popular leading public distributed ledger platforms, received relatively good marks there. And then I would only imagine if we were to then take this comparison of Hedera versus some of the private, permission ledgers that are out there, such as the Cordas and Hyperledgers of the world, we would definitely see, some comparable results here too, as far as just kind of performance, governance, fairness and distributed consensus and security goes in comparison to those platforms. So pretty interesting development that I thought I would share with everyone. I don't know, SupremeX67, if you had any kind of thoughts or comments on that.
I'm looking for the PDF.
Oh, well, like I said, it's on the page there, so
Well, that's the link. No, so there's a post saying that the link redirect to there. And I think there might be a spelling issue on the link itself. That's why it's not actually going to it.
But there's the link on the page, right? It says you can download the file here. But then
Yeah,
they actually
that just sends you to Hedera's website.
But then they actually have the PDF file right here, where you can actually download it yourself.
What? I missed it.
So if you go down to Miriam Lapis, like post there, this is where you can actually see the PDF document.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, I see it there.
So yeah, you can go check it out. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the episode here. So, like I said, the last thing I wanted to cover off is more industry news, and this is not so focused on Hedera Hashgraph, but this is focused on distributed ledger technologies overall, because I came across a very interesting development this past week, and if you're a believer, especially DLTs in the enterprise space, this was definitely an article that had caught a lot of attention, and a lot of folks in the market were talking about it. And it centers around the French bank Société Générale, or SupremeX67. I know you're the French speaker here. What's the French way of pronouncing it?
Sorry, where is it? I don't see it.
I have it up here on the stream.
Oh yes, Société Générale.
Okay, there we go. We have the French speaker there that pronounces it the right way. I'll just use my East Coast American accent here and just call it SocGen, because that's kind of the nickname that a lot of folks use for, to describe them. But basically, this article, as you'll see here, is featured in CoinDesk. But this was some of the big news of this past week in the DLT space. And basically, SocGen issued a $112 million bond on the Ethereum, wait for it, public network. And the reason why I'm personally excited about this, and I think anyone that's a believer in distributed ledger technologies within the enterprise space should be excited for this, is that it was done on the public Ethereum ledger. Put everything aside of whether or not you believe Ethereum has a future, the performance, etc. The mere fact that a large, institution, whether it was a bank or anyone else, actually ran a $112 million bond in the form of a smart contract on a public blockchain is something to kind of be excited about. Like, it means that someone actually did something legitimate beyond CryptoKitties or an ICO on top of a public distributed ledger platform, instead of opting for a private chain, which we've seen a lot of developments taking place on the Hyperledger platform, JP Morgan's Quorum blockchain, which is a fork of the Ethereum one, or other kind of private permission versions of Ethereum. The fact that someone did something on a public network is something to really take notice of. And basically, the article goes into more detail. And like I said, I've left a link down below. But basically, they did this kind of subsidiary of SocGen called SocGen SFH. Basically minted their own tokens, which were more or less like essentially like a bond, or like a covered bond, that are basically backed by specific assets that basically remain on the issuer's balance sheet, so remain on SocGen's balance sheet. So more or less, this was a secured, a secured bond backed by real assets, but done in tokenized form. And then also too, the bond, obtained a rating from Moody's Investor Services, and like now, granted, the investor in the bond itself was SocGen itself. So basically, the subsidiary issued the bond themselves, and then SocGen, the parent company, or one of the parent companies of the entity, ended up buying up the bonds. But the fact that they were able to do it and then do it on the public chain, like I said before, is really just exciting. And ultimately, they had a lot of other constituents and parties involved that you would typically have to engage when you would issue, debts. I'm sorry, bonds in the public space. And also to professional service firm PwC, who we just mentioned before in the previous segment, had provided advice to SocGen, and also a law firm was engaged to support that. So, like I said before, the reason I'm taking the time to point this out is that this is actually a real live use case of someone actually doing something on top of a public DLT. Now, like I said before, put things aside of whether or not you think Ethereum is the right choice of the matter, but the fact that someone did something real should take notice. And like I said, check out this article, and it'll be interesting to see what other kind of developments and things take place in the later on this year. So yeah, I don't know, Supreme X67. I'm a little bit excited here just because I spent a lot of time doing research over security tokens and security token platforms. So this was just really kind of cool to see, like a pretty reputable, global financial institution doing something on not just on a private blockchain, but also like on a public blockchain. So I don't know. I'm excited. I don't know about you.
No, I agree. This is great for the mainstream where the most of the capital is sitting. You do want money to flow in so that there's a need or an interest generated from it. I think from a consumer point of view, they're looking at this article is like, yeah, just another bank, but you need cash flow go to the institution and the enterprises before anyone takes any project seriously in the long run. So I think this is absolutely great. It's just consumer can't grasp how important this is when you think about it, right?
Well, the other thing is like in the enterprise DLT space, it's a lot of concepts of like fast. There's like first to market, fast followers, etc. And a lot of enterprises are just like they want to do something with it, but at the same time too, they don't want to be the first ones to jump off the cliff. How that expression goes. What I think is really great about this is to see like a reputable company like SocGen doing it on the public blockchain. Just I think it will encourage other entities to be more comfortable with doing stuff in the public array, because you go around and you talk with people in industry and you ask them, like everyone's like stuck in this mindset of like it has to be private permission ledgers due to security, blah 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 blah. But then you ask people like, but do you think private permission is the way of the future? And they're like, no, not at all. Like, it's just this is the cards that we're dealt with right now because our internal people are telling us to go with the private permission ledgers just because of security concerns, etc. But we all know that there's this perception that the public ledgers are, like the wild wild west, and you just want to stay away from those until things kind of further develop. But the fact of the matter is that someone's actually doing something in the public blockchain and will only kind of further support the community and getting people more comfortable in doing it. And then the fact that PwC was advising them, only you can speculate whether or not they're going to help advise other clients looking to do something similar in this space. So I think it's a really good development. And yeah, like I said, wasn't Hedera Hashgraph related, but just keep in mind, whatever you can do on Ethereum, you can also port that over to Hedera. So hey, who knows, maybe Hedera might be the platform of choice or the protocol of choice for security tokens of sorts in the future. So like I said, exciting development, great news for the DLT space. All right, so this brings us to our end of our episode. I just want to thank you, all the folks that have tuned in and stuck with me to the end of this episode, or stuck with me and also SupremeX67 to the end of this show. Really appreciate the support, and like I always say, make sure to smash that like button, and also consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. But before I just part here, one thing I just do want to kind of call out is just more of a kind of open reflection to the folks in the community, and it's just really a focus around kind of crypto Twitter. And it's just more of a reminder of folks in the community to just be thoughtful of the fact that, when you're representing Hashgraph, whether or not we work for Hashgraph or work for Hadera or not, uh, you know, certain viewpoints might be like interpreted in certain ways, and I think the one thing is like, let me just put it this simple: it's just let's just make sure that we're engaging in appropriate behavior and reasonable behavior, whether or not the people that we're engaging with on Twitter might be, you know, not informed about Hedera, or saying really stupid things about Hedera. Just make sure that we're keeping a degree of professionalism, because the last thing we really want to do is be the next XRP army of sorts, and then also considering that Hedera is not even made available for open access. I think it's just really we got to pick and choose which kind of battles that we get into within the crypto space. So this is just me kind of going off on a ramp here, but I just would think is that let's just focus all of our attention now, educating people about Hedera, but not necessarily getting into fights with people about like Hedera. I don't know, Supreme X67.
Yeah, you said we're not starting an army. What am I supposed to do with all these flags?
or H bar battalion.
H bar battalion.
Because honestly speaking, the XRP army, especially in the enterprise DLT space, people do not look highly of that, and if in a lot of ways, I think that really diminished the reputation and the brand value of Ripple, by having that kind of unofficial community that follows and is just blindly leading, listening to the leadership of Ripple. In a lot of ways, it's just this running joke within the industry that XRP Army is just a group of folks on the internet that are just really misinformed, and as a result, it really people are kind of that impacts people's perceptions of Ripple and their products and services, and leveraging that for commercial applications. So I just point that out because we just hate to see Hedera kind of ending up in the same position. So, like I just say, this is just an open comment to folks in the community out there. Just make sure you're engaging, in certain kind of conversations on the internet. Like I said, have a conversation, but not arguments. So, with that said, I'm going to get off my soapbox here and just part here and just say thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this. If there's anything else that you're interested in and wanted to have further thoughts on, feel free to leave comments down below. I'll be periodically reviewing them after after this renders and posts onto YouTube. And also, if you want to connect with me, feel free to reach out to me on any of the social media that's listed down below. Really appreciate your time and support, and also thank you to SupremeX67 for joining me on today's episode. It's been great. Yep.
Sorry, I just wanted to close on something. So the PDF that you brought up, I posted the link on our Discord. So that we have a channel called Other Gossip that we also talk sometimes of other technology. So if you want to continue the conversation there, the PDF is there for you to look at. And I'll be glad to also put my input on that PDF, because I find some things they got wrong, some things they got right. I'm not just referring to Hadera, but projects in general. So if you want to continue the conversation there, it's the Discord. I think you'll have the link for the Discord channel, right?
Yep, that's also down below in the description. All right. So thank you for that, Supreme X67. And like I said before, thank you all for watching. It's been great. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thank you.